You wake up and within 60 seconds it starts. The phone. The notifications. The low-grade hum of anxiety that sits in your chest like a second heartbeat. And before you've even put your feet on the floor, your mind splits in two directions. One voice says you need to do more, be more, push harder, close the gap between who you are and who you want to be. The other voice says you need to let go, stop chasing, stop clinging, find peace with what's already here. And here's the costly mistake most people make: they think these are two different philosophies. They think they have to pick a side. They spend years bouncing between the two, grinding until they burn out, then retreating into numbed passivity until the guilt pulls them back to the grind. And they never once stop to ask the question that actually matters. Here it is. Wanting less and pushing harder aren't opposites. They're the same act seen from different angles. Both are the death of the comfortable, anxious ego that keeps you stuck. That's the thesis. That's the thing nobody wants to say out loud. The choice between subtraction and effort is a false choice, and falling for it is exactly what keeps you trapped in the pattern you're desperate to escape. Let me slow this down, because it's going to mess with your head. You've probably felt this tension your whole life without having words for it. You read one voice telling you that the path to freedom is radical desire reduction, choosing what to care about and subtracting everything else. You read another voice telling you that you're capable of far more than you think, that your mind calls for surrender long before your body is actually spent, that the only way out is through. So the first path says, subtract. Choose what you care about with ruthless precision. Let everything else fall away. Not because you're lazy, not because you've given up, but because you understand that caring about everything is the same as caring about nothing. The person who reacts to every provocation, who has an opinion on everything, who chases every desire that flickers across their mind, that person has no center. They are a weather vane spinning in the wind. And they call it being passionate. The Stoics would call it being a slave. Because here's what nobody tells you about wanting less: it's not passive. It's one of the most aggressive things you can do. It's an act of conquest, not of the world, but of yourself. To look at everything you could want, everything you could chase, everything society tells you that you should be reaching for, and say no, not because you can't have it, but because you've decided it doesn't get to own you. That takes more strength than chasing ever will. Most people can't do it. Most people would rather chase 100 things and get none of them than choose one thing and go all in. Because chasing lets you keep the fantasy. Subtraction forces you to face the truth, that most of what you want, you don't actually need, and the wanting itself is the suffering. So that's one side. And it's powerful. And it's incomplete. Because here's the other side. Here's the voice that says you're not even close to your limit. Here's the truth that the mind calls for surrender long before the body is actually spent. Your brain will tell you you're done at maybe 40% of your real capacity. That's not a metaphor. That's a physiological reality. Your nervous system is designed to conserve energy, to pull back from the edge, to keep you in the safe middle zone where nothing too bad can happen but nothing too good can happen either. And most people live their entire lives in that middle zone. They call it being reasonable. They call it being balanced. They call it being an adult. But here's what that middle zone actually is. It's a padded cell. It's the space where you're comfortable enough to not change and uncomfortable enough to complain about it. And it's the most dangerous place you can live, because it doesn't hurt enough to force transformation and it doesn't feel good enough to satisfy you. It just grinds. Day after day, year after year, you exist in this low-grade dissatisfaction that never gets bad enough to make you move and never gets good enough to make you stop wanting. That's what comfort actually is. Comfort isn't self-care. Comfort is a painkiller. It dulls the signal without treating the wound. And the wound is this: you know you're capable of more. Not more in the sense of more stuff, more achievements, more lines on a resume. More in the sense of more life. More depth. More contact with your own aliveness. You feel it in the moments when you've pushed past something you thought you couldn't do, not the achievement itself, but the feeling that came with it. The feeling that you were, for once, fully present. Fully engaged. Fully yourself. That feeling doesn't come from subtraction. It comes from effort. From going into the thing you're afraid of and staying there longer than your mind tells you is safe. Discomfort is the price of admission to a meaningful life. Not discomfort for its own sake, that's just punishment. But the discomfort that comes from refusing to stay where you are when you know you're meant to be somewhere else. The discomfort of growth. The discomfort of choosing the harder thing because the harder thing is the truer thing. So now you have two paths. One says subtract desire. The other says push through resistance. And here's where most people get lost. Because they treat these as two different mountains to climb. They think the desire reduction people are telling them to give up, and the push harder people are telling them to grind. And they pick the one that feels easier in the moment and call it a philosophy. But here's the truth nobody wants to say out loud. Both paths are walking toward the same place. Both paths are doing the same thing. They are both killing the anxious, comfort-seeking ego that runs your life. Think about it. What happens when you genuinely subtract desire? You stop being controlled by what other people think. You stop chasing validation. You stop needing the outcome to be a certain way in order to feel okay. You let go of the story that you need X before you can be happy. And in that letting go, what dies? The ego dies. The part of you that was defined by its wants, by its grievances, by its endless comparison of what it has versus what it deserves, that part shrinks. It doesn't disappear entirely. It stops running the show. Now think about what happens when you genuinely push harder. You stop being controlled by comfort. You stop listening to the voice that says stop, that says this is too much, that says you've done enough. You go past the point where your mind wants to quit, and in that space beyond the mind's protests, what do you find? You find that the thing you were afraid of, the exhaustion, the pain, the exposure, isn't who you are. You are something else. Something underneath the resistance. Something that doesn't need comfort to survive. And in that moment, what dies? The same ego. The same part of you that was defined by its need for safety, its need for things to be easy, its need to be coddled. Do you see it? Both paths converge. Both paths end up in the same place, the death of the part of you that keeps you small. One gets there by subtraction. The other gets there by expansion. But the destination is identical. And that's why choosing only one and rejecting the other keeps you stuck. Because you need both movements. You need to kill the ego that clings to desire, and you need to kill the ego that flees from discomfort. And if you only subtract, you risk using subtraction as a sophisticated form of avoidance, calling your fear growth, calling your passivity peace. And if you only push, you risk using effort as a sophisticated form of grasping, chasing and chasing and chasing, never arriving, never feeling like enough, building an identity out of the grind that's just as fragile as the identity built out of comfort. Here's what nobody tells you. The trap isn't wanting too much or wanting too little. The trap is wanting from the ego instead of wanting from the soul. The ego wants in order to fill a hole. It wants because it feels incomplete and it believes the next thing will complete it. This kind of wanting can never be satisfied, because the whole isn't caused by the absence of the thing, it's caused by the belief that you need the thing to be whole. The soul, on the other hand, wants because it's alive. It wants the way a river wants the sea. Not because it's incomplete, but because it's moving. It wants from fullness, not from emptiness. And that kind of wanting doesn't create suffering. It creates direction. So the real question isn't should you want less or push harder. The real question is, from where are you wanting? From where are you pushing? Are you subtracting because you're afraid, or are you subtracting because you've seen clearly? Are you pushing because you're running from something, or are you pushing because something true is pulling you forward? This is the diagnostic question. And you need it, because choosing the wrong approach at the wrong time is what keeps you stuck in the exact pattern you're trying to escape. Let me give you the map. When you're in a season where everything feels urgent, where you're chasing 10 things at once, where your mind is a crowded room and you can't hear yourself think, that's not the time to push harder. That's the time to subtract. Because what you're experiencing isn't ambition. It's anxiety wearing ambition's clothes. The ego has multiplied its desires to avoid sitting with itself, and each new desire is another distraction from the emptiness it doesn't want to face. Pushing harder here doesn't make you stronger. It makes the ego stronger. It makes the grasping stronger. You'll accomplish things and feel nothing. You'll hit the target and immediately need a new one. The hole doesn't close. It just gets deeper. So in that season, you subtract. You strip away. You ask yourself, what is the one thing that, if I focused on it and let everything else go, would make the rest unnecessary or easier? Not easier in the sense of less work. Easier in the sense of more aligned. More true. You pick one desire. One direction. One contract for unhappiness instead of 50. And you let the rest burn. Not forever. Just for now. Just long enough to hear your own voice again beneath the noise of everything you've been told to want. But there's another season. There's a season where you've already done the subtracting. You've narrowed your focus. You know what matters. You've let go of the 10 things that were pulling you in 10 directions. And now you're face to face with the one thing that does matter, and you're not doing it. You're not doing it because it's hard. Because it's uncomfortable. Because your mind is telling you that you're tired, that you've done enough, that it's okay to rest, that you can start tomorrow. And in that season, subtraction isn't wisdom. It's cowardice wearing wisdom's clothes. You've already let go of what doesn't matter. Now the only thing left between you and the life you actually want is the resistance you're refusing to walk through. And that resistance isn't a wall. It's a threshold. And the only currency it accepts is effort. In that season, you push. Not from the ego, not from the part that needs to prove itself, but from the part that knows. The part that has already subtracted the noise and can see clearly what the next step is. That part pushes not to fill a hole but because it's aligned with something real. That kind of pushing doesn't exhaust you. It energizes you. Because you're not fighting against yourself anymore. You're not dragging a divided self toward a goal. You're moving as one thing, in one direction, with your full weight behind it. Most people never get to this clarity because they never do either one fully. They half subtract and half push. They reduce their desires a little but keep 5 going instead of 1. They push a little harder but stop at 35% instead of 40. And they wonder why nothing changes. They wonder why they still don't feel like themselves. Here's why, because you can't half kill an ego. You can't partially let go of the thing that's running you. It doesn't work that way. The ego doesn't respond to negotiation. It responds to decisive action. Either you subtract all the way, or you don't subtract at all. Either you push all the way through the resistance, or you're still inside it. The middle ground isn't balance. It's the place where both strategies fail simultaneously. Let me say that again, because it's the kind of sentence that should stop you. The middle ground isn't balance. It's the place where both strategies fail simultaneously. You've been living in that middle ground. You've been doing a little of both and getting the benefits of neither. Subtracting just enough to feel virtuous but not enough to actually be free. Pushing just hard enough to feel productive but not hard enough to actually transform. And the result is the life you have right now. The one that's fine. The one that's okay. The one that you'd describe as pretty good if someone asked, and that you'd never describe as alive. Here's what nobody tells you about being fine. Fine is the most dangerous word in the English language. Fine means you've stopped feeling the pain that would make you change and you've stopped feeling the joy that would make you certain you're on the right path. Fine is the emotional equivalent of Novocaine. Nothing hurts. Nothing sings. You just exist. And you call it stability. You call it being an adult. You call it being realistic. And meanwhile the version of you that could actually live, that could actually feel the full weight of this one brief, improbable existence, that version is still in there, still waiting, still pounding on the walls of the comfortable prison you've built and calling it a home. So let me give you something practical. Something you can actually use. Not a platitude. A diagnostic. When you feel stuck, and you will feel stuck, everyone does, the Stoics felt stuck, the emperors felt stuck, the people you admire felt stuck. When you feel stuck, don't ask yourself whether you should want less or push harder. That question will spin you in circles forever. Ask yourself this instead: what am I afraid of right now? Because the answer to that question tells you which path you're on. If you're afraid of missing out, of not being enough, of not having enough, of being left behind, if the fear is about scarcity, about not getting what you want, then you need to subtract. The ego has taken over the wanting. You've signed too many contracts for unhappiness. You're not chasing goals. You're running from the feeling of insufficiency, and no amount of achievement will ever outrun it. You need to let go. Not of effort, but of the desperate, clawing need for outcomes to validate your existence. But if you're afraid of the effort itself, of the discomfort, of the exposure, of the possibility that you might try and fail, of the quiet voice that says you're not strong enough, if the fear is about the process, about what it will cost you to walk the path you already know is right, then you need to push. The ego has taken over the comfort. It's hiding behind the language of self-care and balance and being kind to yourself. And it's keeping you in that padded cell. You need to go past the point where your mind says stop. Not to prove anything. Not to earn your worth. But because the resistance is the door, and the only way through it is through it. Do you see how the same fear, the fear of not being enough, shows up in both directions? In one, it drives you to chase everything. In the other, it keeps you from chasing anything. Same root. Same ego. Same lie, that you are not already enough, and that something external, whether getting more or needing less, will finally make you whole. Neither will. That's the secret. Neither getting everything you want nor wanting nothing at all will make you feel like yourself. Because the feeling of being yourself doesn't come from the quantity of your desires or the intensity of your effort. It comes from the alignment between what you do and what you actually believe. It comes from integrity. Not integrity in the moral sense, though that's part of it. Integrity in the structural sense. Wholeness. When your actions match your values, when your effort serves something you've chosen rather than something you've been handed, when your subtraction is an act of love rather than an act of fear, that's when you feel like yourself. That's when the noise goes quiet. That's when the pendulum stops. The Stoics understood this at a level most modern self-help can't even see. They didn't teach wanting less as a lifestyle choice. They didn't teach pushing harder as a productivity hack. They taught that the only true battlefield is internal, and that every external struggle, whether it's the grind or the letting go, is a training ground for the one fight that matters, the fight against the part of you that would rather be comfortable than be real. Marcus Aurelius sat in a tent on the Danube frontier, surrounded by war, plague, betrayal, and the weight of an empire that was already beginning to crack. And he didn't write about grinding harder. He didn't write about letting go either, not in the way we mean it. He wrote about stripping away the unnecessary. He wrote about focusing on what's in your control and releasing what isn't. But here's the part people miss: what's in your control includes your effort. What's in your control includes how far you're willing to go. What's in your control includes whether you get up when your mind says stay down. Releasing what you can't control isn't passivity. It's the precondition for going all in on what you can. Epictetus was born into slavery. He was beaten so badly his leg was permanently damaged. And he didn't teach his students to want less in the sense of giving up. He taught them to want less in the sense of wanting only what's already within their power, and then to push with everything they had inside that space. That's the synthesis. That's where the two paths meet. You subtract everything that's outside your control, every opinion, every outcome, every version of the future you're trying to force. And then, inside the space that remains, inside the small, warm circle of what's actually yours to shape, you push. You push hard. You push past the 40%. You push until the ego's voice is a distant whisper and the only sound left is the sound of your own will aligned with your own truth. That's the Stoic answer nobody gives you. Not want less. Not push harder. Want the right things, the things within your control, the things aligned with your deepest values, and then push with everything you have. Subtract the false. Expand into the true. And let the comfortable ego that's been running your life die in the space between those two movements. Because it will fight. It will fight like hell. It will tell you that subtraction is failure. It will tell you that effort is suffering. It will tell you that the middle ground is safer. It will whisper that fine is good enough. It will say you've already done so much, you've already been through enough, you deserve to rest. And maybe you do. Maybe rest is exactly what this moment requires. But you won't know if that rest is real or if it's the ego in disguise until you've asked the diagnostic question and answered it honestly. What am I afraid of right now? And is that fear pointing me toward letting go or toward going through? Here's the thing about this question. It requires honesty. Not the performative kind, not the journaling about your feelings kind, but the brutal, quiet, nobody's watching kind. The kind where you sit with yourself and admit that the thing you've been calling peace is actually avoidance. Or that the thing you've been calling ambition is actually fear. That honesty is the beginning of everything. Without it, you'll keep choosing the wrong tool at the wrong time. You'll subtract when you should push and push when you should subtract and call it growth either way. And you'll stay stuck. Not because you're lazy, not because you're broken, but because you've been asking the wrong question. The wrong question is, should I want less or push harder? The right question is, what is the anxious ego afraid of, and which movement, subtraction or expansion, will kill it? Because that's what this is about. Killing the ego. Not metaphorically. Not gently. The part of you that keeps you small, that keeps you chasing, that keeps you hiding, that keeps you fine, that part needs to die. And you are the only one who can kill it. No one's coming to do it for you. No philosophy will do it for you. No amount of reading or watching or thinking will do it for you. The only thing that works is action. Decisive, specific, terrifying action. Either letting go of the desire that's been running you, or walking through the resistance that's been blocking you. And doing it today. Not tomorrow. Not when you feel ready. Not when the conditions are perfect. Today. Because the conditions will never be perfect. The ego will always find a reason to wait. And waiting is how lives get spent instead of lived. You have one life. I know you've heard that before. Everyone says it. But I want you to actually hear it. 1. Not as a number, but as a weight. One life. 1. And right now, in this moment, you are spending it. You're spending it either on the things that matter or on the things that don't. You're spending it either moving toward who you actually are or orbiting the comfortable version of who you've settled for being. And the clock is running. Not in a dramatic, movie soundtrack way. In a quiet, ordinary, terrifying way. Another day. Another week. Another year of fine. Another year of the middle ground where both strategies fail and you call it balance. So here's what I want you to do. Not forever. Just today. Just for the next 24 hours. Ask yourself the question. What am I afraid of right now? And then listen. Not to the first answer. The first answer is always the ego's public relations team. Listen to the second answer. The quieter one. The one that comes after you've sat with yourself for long enough that the noise starts to thin. That answer will tell you whether today is a day for subtraction or a day for expansion. And once you know, don't negotiate. Don't hedge. Don't do a little of both. Go all in. If it's subtraction, subtract completely. Drop the desire. Not partially. Not with a secret plan to pick it back up later. Drop it. Let it go. Feel the vertigo of wanting less and stay there. If it's expansion, expand completely. Go past the point where your mind says stop. Not 2% past. 20% past. Find the place where the ego's voice cracks and what's left is something quieter and stronger and older than the ego ever was. And then tomorrow, ask again. Because the answer will be different. Some days will be subtraction days. Some days will be push days. And over time, you'll stop experiencing these as opposing forces. You'll start experiencing them as breathing. Subtraction is the exhale. Expansion is the inhale. You need both. You've been holding your breath your whole life, and you didn't even notice because you got used to the feeling of not breathing fully. You got used to the middle ground. You got used to fine. The Stoics didn't teach a static philosophy. They taught a living practice. Something you do every day, in every moment, with every decision. Not a set of beliefs to hold. A way of moving through the world. And the way of moving through the world is this: subtract what isn't yours, expand into what is, and let the ego that stands between you and your own life dissolve in the process. You wake up tomorrow. The phone. The notifications. The anxiety. And for the first time, instead of asking yourself whether you should do more or care less, you ask yourself what you're afraid of. And you answer honestly. And you move. Not because you're fearless. Because you've decided that the fear doesn't get to drive anymore. You drive. You choose. You subtract or you push, and either way, you're the one holding the wheel. That's what it means to be a Stoic. Not calm. Not unfeeling. Not detached in the way people misunderstand the word. Alive. Fully, dangerously, uncomfortably alive. Willing to want less when wanting less is the true path. Willing to push harder when pushing harder is the true path. And always, always, willing to let the part of you that wants comfort more than truth die a quiet death in the space between one choice and the next. Wanting less and pushing harder aren't opposites. They're the same door. And the door leads to the same place, a life where you finally feel like yourself. Not because you got everything you wanted. Not because you wanted nothing at all. But because you stopped letting the wanting, and the fear underneath it, run your life. You took it back. One subtraction at a time. One push past the limit at a time. One honest answer to one honest question at a time. Stay disciplined.